Doctor's warning. These 6 healthy foods accelerate Alzheimer's. Here's Dr. William Lee. Stop eating these foods right now because what I'm about to share with you could be the most critical 30 minutes of brain health information you'll hear this decade. And I say that not to be dramatic, but because most doctors, including many neurologists, are still not telling their patients over 60 about this. They're recommending foods they genuinely believe are protecting your brain when the latest research shows these exact same foods may actually be accelerating cognitive decline at the cellular level. Let me tell you about Harold, a 73-year-old retired accountant from Portland, Oregon. Harold did everything his doctor told him to do. He ate what he thought were the healthiest foods available. He exercised regularly. He took his medications. But over 18 months, his wife watched him decline. First, it was forgetting where he put his keys, then forgetting appointments. Then one morning, he couldn't remember his grandson's name. By the time they ran the cognitive tests, Harold's brain showed markers of advanced neurological inflammation that had been building silently for years. And when we traced back through his diet, we found he was consuming 5 of the 6 foods I'm about to share with you today, multiple times per week, believing they were protecting his brain. This is how Alzheimer's develops. Not suddenly, not with warning signs you can feel. It builds silently over decades through chronic neuroinflammation, oxidative stress, and the accumulation of toxic proteins in your brain tissue. And certain foods that appear in every healthy eating guide, foods your doctor probably recommended, are directly feeding these destructive processes. I'm Dr. William Lee, a physician, medical researcher, and scientist who has spent over 25 years studying how food affects the human body at the cellular level. I've worked with institutions including Harvard Medical School, the National Institutes of Health, and leading research centers around the world investigating the intersection of nutrition and disease prevention. And what I've learned about how certain foods impact brain aging has fundamentally changed how I counsel my patients over 60 about protecting their cognitive function. A landmark study published by researchers at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, following over 900 adults aged 58 to 98 for an average of 6 years, found something extraordinary. Participants whose diets included higher amounts of specific food categories showed cognitive decline equivalent to being 11 years older compared to those who avoided these foods. 11 years. That's the difference between finishing the Sunday crossword puzzle and not remembering what day of the week it is. That's the difference between driving yourself to appointments and depending on others for basic transportation. That's the difference between living independently and needing supervised care. Today, I'm going to break down the 6 most dangerous foods for brain aging, ranked from concerning to absolutely critical. These are foods hiding in plain sight, foods marketed as healthy, foods you probably have in your kitchen right now. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to remove from your diet tomorrow morning and what to replace them with to give your brain the protection it desperately needs. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something personally. Leave a comment below telling me your age and whether you've noticed any changes in your memory or mental clarity over the past few years. Do you forget names more often? Lose your train of thought mid-sentence? Walk into a room and forget why you went there? I read every single comment on this channel, and your answers genuinely shape what I cover next. This conversation belongs to you. Coming in at number 6, and this one surprises almost everyone I tell it to, we are talking about whole wheat bread and whole grain products that have been marketed to seniors for decades as the healthier choice compared to white bread. Here's what's actually happening inside your brain when you consume these products regularly after the age of 65. Your brain operates on glucose, that's true. But what most people don't understand is that after age 65, your brain's ability to regulate glucose metabolism declines by approximately 35% compared to younger adults. This creates a condition researchers call impaired glucose tolerance in the brain. When you eat whole wheat bread, even though it has a lower glycemic index than white bread, it still breaks down into glucose relatively quickly. That glucose enters your bloodstream and crosses the blood-brain barrier. But here's the critical part. Your aging brain can no longer process that glucose efficiently. The excess glucose that your brain cells cannot immediately use triggers a process called glycation. Glycation is when glucose molecules bind to proteins in your brain tissue, creating what scientists call advanced glycation end products. And the acronym for that is AGEs. Think of ages like rust forming on metal. Once they form, they cannot be reversed. They accumulate in your brain tissue, particularly in regions responsible for memory formation, like the hippocampus. And these age proteins directly interfere with the clearance of amyloid beta plaques, the toxic protein fragments that are the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. A comprehensive study from the Mayo Clinic following over 937 adults aged 70 and older found that participants whose diets were highest in carbohydrates, even complex carbohydrates from whole grains, had an 89% increased risk of developing mild cognitive impairment or dementia compared to those consuming the lowest amounts, 89%. That's not a small effect. That's a massive difference in your likelihood of maintaining your mental clarity into your 80s and beyond. Let me tell you about Margaret, a 69-year-old retired school teacher from Tucson, Arizona. Margaret came to me complaining of what she called senior moments that were happening multiple times per day. She would forget the names of her former students when she ran into them at the grocery store. She would start a sentence and lose her train of thought halfway through. She told me she felt like her mind was in a fog. When we analyzed her diet, Margaret was eating whole wheat toast for breakfast, a whole grain sandwich for lunch, and whole wheat pasta several times per week, believing she was making the healthier choice. We made one simple change. We replaced those whole grain products with lower glycemic alternatives, including vegetables, legumes, and small amounts of true whole grains like steel-cut oats and quinoa consumed with healthy fats to slow glucose absorption even further. Within 90 days, Margaret reported that the brain fog had lifted significantly. She was remembering names again. She could follow conversations without losing her place. She told me in tears that she felt like herself again for the first time in 3 years. Here's what you need to do. If you're currently consuming whole wheat bread, whole grain cereals, or whole wheat pasta regularly, I want you to replace these with non-grain alternatives or limit true whole grains to small portions paired with healthy fats and protein. Think cauliflower rice instead of brown rice, zucchini noodles or chickpea pasta instead of whole wheat pasta, eggs with vegetables instead of whole grain toast. This single change can dramatically reduce the glycation occurring in your brain tissue right now. And here's a synergy tip that compounds this benefit. When you do consume any grain products, pair them with extra virgin olive oil or avocado. The monounsaturated fats slow glucose absorption by up to 43%, according to research from Tufts University, which means less glucose spike and less glycation damage to your brain. Number 6 is powerful, but number 5 is where the science gets truly concerning. We're talking about fruit juice, including 100% fruit juice with no added sugar that seniors are told is equivalent to eating whole fruit. It is absolutely not equivalent, and here's why that matters for your brain. After the age of 70, your brain loses approximately 40% of its insulin sensitivity compared to when you were in your 30s. Insulin is the hormone that helps cells absorb glucose from your bloodstream. When your brain cells become insulin resistant, glucose cannot enter the cells efficiently. This creates two simultaneous problems. First, your brain cells are starving for energy even though glucose is abundant in your blood. Second, that excess glucose in your brain tissue triggers inflammation and oxidative stress. When you drink fruit juice, even pure fruit juice with no added sugar, you are consuming concentrated fructose without the fiber that would normally slow its absorption. An 8-ounce glass of orange juice contains the sugar equivalent of approximately 4 whole oranges, but with virtually none of the fiber. That fructose enters your bloodstream within minutes, spikes your blood sugar dramatically, and crosses into your brain where it cannot be efficiently processed by your insulin-resistant brain cells. But here's what most doctors never explain. Fructose metabolism in the brain produces significantly more oxidative stress than glucose metabolism. Oxidative stress means free radicals, unstable molecules that damage your cellular structures, including the delicate membranes around your neurons and the DNA inside your brain cells. This oxidative damage is cumulative. It builds over years and decades, and it directly accelerates the formation of the amyloid plaques and tau tangles that define Alzheimer's disease. A groundbreaking study published in the journal Neurology, conducted by researchers at Boston University School of Medicine, found that adults who consumed 1 or more servings of fruit juice daily had significantly smaller total brain volume and scored lower on tests of episodic memory compared to those who consumed juice less than once per week. Smaller brain volume means brain shrinkage, actual loss of brain tissue, particularly in regions critical for memory and executive function. Robert, a 71-year-old retired electrician from Phoenix, Arizona, came to me after his wife noticed he was becoming increasingly forgetful and irritable. He had started a daily habit of drinking 2 glasses of 100% cranberry juice because he had read it was good for urinary health and full of antioxidants. What he didn't realize was that those 2 glasses contained over 60 grams of sugar, mostly fructose, with virtually no fiber to slow absorption. His brain was being flooded with fructose twice daily, creating exactly the oxidative environment where neurodegeneration thrives. We eliminated the fruit juice entirely and replaced it with whole berries, particularly blueberries and strawberries, consumed with a handful of walnuts to provide healthy fats and slow any sugar absorption. Within 4 months, Robert's wife reported that his irritability had decreased dramatically. His memory was noticeably sharper. He was completing projects he started instead of abandoning them halfway through. His mental clarity had returned in a way his wife said she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Here's your action step. If you're currently drinking fruit juice, even 100% fruit juice, stop immediately. Replace it with whole fruit consumed in moderation, ideally berries, which have the lowest sugar content and highest antioxidant levels. If you want the cranberry benefits Robert was seeking, eat a small handful of fresh or frozen cranberries, not juice. Your brain will thank you. The synergy pairing here is critical. Always consume fruit with a source of healthy fat or protein. A handful of blueberries with Greek yogurt, an apple with almond butter. This combination slows sugar absorption and prevents the glucose spike that damages your brain tissue. Research from Loma Linda University shows this pairing reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes by up to 51%. Now let's move to number 4, and this is where things get genuinely controversial because we're talking about low-fat and fat-free dairy products that have been recommended to seniors for decades as the heart-healthy choice. The problem is, what may benefit your cardiovascular system in theory is actively harming your brain in practice. Your brain is approximately 60% fat by dry weight. The cell membranes of your neurons, the myelin sheaths that insulate your nerve fibers, the synaptic structures where communication between brain cells occurs, all of these are made primarily from fat. After the age of 65, your brain's ability to synthesize and repair these fatty structures declines by approximately 30%. This means you need more dietary fat, not less, to maintain brain structure and function. But here's the paradox. When you consume low-fat dairy, you're not just getting less fat, you're getting more sugar. When manufacturers remove fat from milk, yogurt, and other dairy products, they typically add sugar or artificial sweeteners to maintain palatability. A 6-ounce serving of low-fat fruit yogurt can contain up to 26 grams of sugar, but even plain low-fat dairy contains lactose, a milk sugar, in higher concentrations than full-fat versions because the fat that would dilute it has been removed. Your brain is being flooded with sugar while simultaneously being deprived of the fats it needs to maintain its structure. Furthermore, many of the brain protective nutrients in dairy are fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamin K2, which protects against calcium deposits in brain tissue, is found in the fat portion of dairy. When you consume fat-free dairy, you're missing these protective compounds entirely. A landmark study from Sweden, published in the journal Neurobiology of Aging, following over 1,500 adults for over 2 decades, found something remarkable. Participants who consumed full-fat dairy had significantly lower rates of cognitive decline compared to those consuming low-fat or fat-free dairy products. The researchers specifically noted that the saturated fats in full-fat dairy appeared to support myelin maintenance and reduce neuroinflammation when consumed in moderate amounts as part of a whole foods diet. Dorothy, a 76-year-old retired nurse from Memphis, Tennessee, had switched to fat-free yogurt and skim milk years earlier on her cardiologist's advice. She was experiencing progressive memory problems that frightened her deeply. She would forget conversations she had just had with her daughter. She would reread the same page of a book multiple times without remembering what she had read. When we discussed her diet and reintroduced full-fat Greek yogurt and moderate amounts of whole milk dairy, along with increasing her intake of other healthy fats from fish and nuts, within 6 weeks, Dorothy reported that her reading comprehension had improved dramatically. She could follow television programs again without losing the plot. Her daughter confirmed that their phone conversations were more coherent and engaged. Here's what you need to understand. The low-fat dietary advice from the 1980s and 90s was based on cardiovascular concerns that subsequent research has largely debunked for dairy fat specifically. Your brain needs fat. After 65, it needs more fat, not less. Replace low-fat and fat-free dairy with full-fat versions consumed in moderate amounts. Choose plain Greek yogurt with no added sugar over fruit-flavored low-fat versions. Choose whole milk over skim if you tolerate dairy well. The synergy tip for dairy is this. Combine full-fat dairy with foods rich in polyphenols like berries or dark cocoa. Research from Tufts University shows that the combination of dairy fats with polyphenols creates unique anti-inflammatory compounds in your gut that specifically protect brain tissue from age-related inflammation. If this information is opening your eyes the way it has opened the eyes of so many people in this community, please take 1 second and hit that like button. And if you are not yet subscribed, I invite you to join us. I publish evidence-based content specifically for people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond every single week, and it is completely free. Subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a video that could change your health trajectory. And now we arrive at number 3. And this one makes people genuinely angry when I tell them because we're talking about farmed salmon, the fish that's been promoted as brain food for decades because of its omega-3 content. Here's the reality that the salmon industry does not want you to know. After age 70, the integrity of your blood-brain barrier, the protective membrane that controls what enters your brain tissue from your bloodstream, declines by approximately 25%. This means toxins and inflammatory compounds that would have been blocked when you were younger can now enter your brain more easily. Farmed salmon, unlike wild-caught salmon, is typically raised in crowded conditions where fish are fed corn and soy-based feed instead of their natural diet of smaller fish and krill. This creates several problems simultaneously. First, the omega-3 content of farmed salmon is significantly lower than wild salmon, sometimes by as much as 50% depending on farming practices. Second, farmed salmon contains much higher levels of omega-6 fatty acids from the corn and soy feed, and the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is critical for brain inflammation. High omega-6 relative to omega-3 promotes inflammation. Third, and this is what most concerns me for brain health, farmed salmon contains measurably higher levels of persistent organic pollutants, including PCBs and dioxins, that accumulate in fatty tissue. These pollutants are neurotoxic. They cross your weakened blood-brain barrier and accumulate in brain tissue where they promote oxidative stress and interfere with neurotransmitter function. A study published in the journal Science Analyzing Salmon from around the world found that European farmed salmon contained PCB levels up to 8 times higher than wild Pacific salmon. Your compromised blood-brain barrier cannot protect you from these toxins the way it once could. Research from Rush University Medical Center, part of their groundbreaking Mind Diet study, found that adults over 65 who consumed fish with higher levels of environmental contaminants showed accelerated cognitive decline despite the omega-3 benefits, suggesting the toxin burden overwhelmed any protective effects from the fatty acids. Eleanor, a 67-year-old retired librarian from Knoxville, Tennessee, was eating farmed salmon 3 times per week because her doctor told her the omega-3s would protect her brain. But she was experiencing worsening brain fog, difficulty concentrating, and what she described as a mental heaviness that made thinking feel exhausting. When we switched her to wild-caught Alaskan salmon consumed twice per week instead of farmed salmon 3 times per week and added other clean omega-3 sources like sardines and anchovies, within 8 weeks, Eleanor reported that the mental fog had lifted substantially. She described it as feeling like a weight had been removed from her thinking. She was reading multiple books simultaneously again, something she hadn't been able to do in over a year. Here's your critical action point. If you're buying salmon, check the label. If it says Atlantic salmon, it is farmed, period. Wild Atlantic salmon is commercially extinct. Look for wild-caught Alaskan salmon, specifically sockeye, coho, or king salmon. Yes, it costs more, but you're paying for clean omega-3s without the neurotoxin burden. Alternatively, focus on smaller fatty fish like sardines, anchovies, and mackerel, which accumulate far fewer toxins due to their position lower in the food chain. The synergy pairing that amplifies omega 3 benefits is consuming your fish with cruciferous vegetables like broccoli or Brussels sprouts. The sulforaphane compounds in these vegetables activate detoxification pathways that help your body eliminate any environmental contaminants you do consume. Research from Johns Hopkins shows this combination reduces oxidative stress markers by up to 34% compared to fish alone. Now let's move to number 2, the one I teased at the very beginning of this video, and I need you to pay particularly close attention because this food is consumed by millions of seniors every single day, believing it's one of the healthiest choices they can make. We are talking about agave nectar and other so-called natural sweeteners marketed as healthier alternatives to sugar. Here's what you must understand about fructose metabolism in the aging brain. After 75, your brain's ability to metabolize fructose declines dramatically, by over 60% compared to midlife. When you consume agave nectar, which is approximately 85% fructose, far higher than even high fructose corn syrup, that fructose enters your brain where it cannot be efficiently processed.